So let's give a warm Steamboat welcome to the newest, happiest warrior in the United States Senate, Cory Gardner.
Thank you so much. That is great. Thank you.
We took great pride in that.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for the incredible opportunity to be with you again tonight. You know, and it is amazing what $100 million worth of TV ads will do to you when you go into the mall, when you go downtown. In fact, we started this morning off in Grand Junction, Colorado, and I was at the Cabela's, which is always a great place to go to. And I was at the Cabela's, and there was this gentleman who was so excited to see me, and he's like, "Hey, are you? And I looked at him and said, "Yeah." And he grabs his friend, "Hey, it's the governor." So evidently $100 million worth of TV ads is not quite getting all people to recognize where we were. But you know, I think that it's great that you have these buttons where you talk about being defenders of capitalism, defenders of the free market. I'll never forget a couple of years ago, I was at a grocery store on Capitol Hill in Denver, not too far away from the state capitol. I think it was a Whole Foods, and I went into this Whole Foods. Our son at the time was about 1 year old, and of course we needed to go to the grocery store, get some milk for he and his sister. And I go in there, and I walk into this Whole Foods, and there was I think a Democrat lobbyist from the state capitol sees me, and this lobbyist comes up to me and says, "Congressman Gardner, I'm surprised to see you in a place like this." And I held up my half-gallon of organic milk and I said, "Are you kidding me? Any place that can sell milk for $5 a gallon and people buy it? This is a free market dream." You know, it is tonight a great opportunity and privilege to be here, because you think about the times throughout our nation's history when people have gathered together, whether it was small pubs in our nation's the earliest years, restaurants, courthouses, school auditoriums. Over the past 200 plus years, people around our nation have gathered to have conversations not too unsimilar from what our conversations are tonight, about the direction of their country, what is happening to our nation. Gathering in friendship, gathering in friendship and fellowship, gathering to debate and deliberate, gathering to talk about those things that truly matter to the future of our country. And tonight, we're having these conversations not just with the Steamboat Institute, but conversations around the country about what we are doing in our time, this time, to make sure that we together are addressing our nation's greatest challenges. When I considered running for and announced running for the United States Senate, it's been less than a year ago, actually, that I announced for the United States Senate. I remember people coming up to me saying, "Hey, you're crazy. You have the 4th Congressional District. This is a safe seat for you. You could stay there if you wanted to. The redistricting in 2012 made this district a very safe seat. You could stay there for years to come." But no one could look at what is happening in Washington, D.C. No one could look at what is happening in the United States Senate and say that, you know what, let's just not do anything, let's not change anything. Because the business that was being conducted, or perhaps more aptly, the business that is not being conducted at the time in the United States Senate, nobody could be satisfied with what was happening. In the House, we were passing legislation every week, passing legislation, putting it on the desk of Harry Reid, legislation that would create jobs, legislation that would achieve energy independence, energy security, that would get this nation back on track, creating new jobs, making significant strides, and moving our nation forward. But in the Senate, we all know what happened. The bills stalled out. They piled up. They gathered dust. Legislation rarely passed out of the Senate, and necessary action was rarely taken. And while I was proud of what I had been able to accomplish in the House of Representatives, I knew that we had to do more, to stand up, to fight back, because we couldn't simply stand back and continue watching the status quo and the progress of this country to fall behind. And so it was on March 1st that I announced for the United States Senate, and it wasn't a decision that we took lightly, and it wasn't a decision that any of us took lightly, because I knew we'd be going up against an incumbent member of the United States Senate, somebody who'd spent 10 years in the House of Representatives and 6 years in the Senate, and he beat his opponent to become a senator by over 10 points. But I knew that our nation and our state was ready for change. My campaign made it our motto that we would shake up the Senate, and we went out to the people of this great state, and we started to talk about the issues that people wanted to talk about. We called them our Four Corners Plan, and we talked about them with anyone who would listen. We talked about them with people who wanted to listen, some people who didn't want to listen, some people who wanted to shout us down. But we talked about the economy. We talked about unleashing the greatness of our economy, getting this nation back on track, revitalizing small businesses, making sure that we became once again the economic powerhouse of the world that we know we are, by reducing taxes, by making sure that we flatten out the code, make it a fair system for people to keep their own dollars in their own pockets, to invest in their businesses and their families the way they want to. We talked about reducing regulations, about passing things like legislation like the REINS Act, which is a way to reduce regulations and make sure that we're making sure that we're not putting a burden that's too heavy on businesses in this country. We talked about energy independence. We talked about North American energy security. Wouldn't it be nice if we produced the energy to power our cars, to drive our manufacturing, and to heat and cool our homes right here in our own backyard? Wouldn't that be nice? We are close to becoming North American energy independent because of the work that we are doing. Free market ways to develop our energy resources, to constantly explore new ways to develop our resources. We talked about the environment. You know, the last time I was in Steamboat, and I think some of you may have been there in the room, I looked out the gorgeous window right behind us, and we saw the mountains, we saw the scenery, and I'm from Yuma, Colorado, out in the Eastern Plains, and I think I made the comment that Steamboat looks exactly like my home in the Eastern Plains of Colorado, except for the mountains and the trees and the water and all the people. But we talked about the environment, what we can do to make sure that we are passing on to our children and grandchildren the great resources that we have been so abundantly blessed with in the state, what we can do for energy efficiency, how we can make sure that the federal government uses free market solutions to reduce its energy consumption. Did you know that we could save almost $20 billion simply by making federal government buildings more energy efficient? And we can do it with private sector know-how, private sector jobs with no cost to the taxpayer. And we talked about education. We talked about perhaps the most important issue of our time, what we can do to make sure that the next generation of this country has the tools that they need to succeed, the tools that they need to thrive, to grow, to lead this country. We talked about the fact that we don't want Congress in the classroom. How about that? I don't care who it is. I don't want Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell telling our schools what to do. We talked about those issues that help make college affordable, giving people tools to save, giving people tax benefits, advantages for saving for college. The campaign was long and it was grueling, but I'd be lying if I said that it was close to anything easy, because it wasn't. But through it all, I knew that we and our supporters, the people around this state, who were going door to door, making phone calls, knocking on doors, were worth fighting for. And no one from the president to liberal billionaires with axes to grind were going to stop us. Because this is a time in our nation for leadership. It's time for leaders to rise up. It's time for you and I to face the daunting tasks of our country. Through years of bipartisan mismanagement, our national debt has skyrocketed. It's nearly $18 trillion. Years of bipartisan mismanagement, you heard me. Republicans and Democrats have been a part of adding up $18 trillion in debt. America's standing in the world continues to diminish while a crisis after crisis continues. And our very system of governance is being challenged by a president who seems content to legislate with executive orders rather than abide by our constitutional legislative process. The challenges we face and the issues that we all care most deeply about are why I ran for the United States Senate. And talking about those issues and challenges with everyday Coloradans is why I was fortunate enough to win that election. I was humbled and honored by those results, and I'm excited about the work that we have together to do in the future. But the result on November 4th was really only the very beginning, because now the hard work has truly begun and must begin. As I said on election night, the election results, they weren't about a message for Republicans or against Democrats, but it was a warning to those who fail to heed or those who fail to courageously act on our nation's greatest challenges. Now we have to go, all of us, to work, to fix a broken Washington that is out of step, out of touch, and out of time. We must commit ourselves to building a government that we can be proud of again, not building a bigger government, but a government that gets out of the way and lets America work. A government that solves problems because we have leaders who have the courage to lead, to unite those voices that recognize we must find common solutions, an altogether uncommon occurrence in Washington. We must put bill after bill after bill on the president's desk, approving the Keystone Pipeline, repealing and replacing Obamacare, reducing regulations, and restoring our constitutional balance, because now is the time for leadership in Washington. Now is the time for leaders to stand up, to start converting promises into actions. Because the American people have endured years of gridlock in Washington and years of excuses from leaders who were more interested in politics than in progress. You know, the American people have entrusted Republicans with majorities in both houses of Congress. It's a tremendous responsibility for the Great Opportunity Party and a tremendous opportunity to pass legislation that addresses the biggest challenges of our time and dealing with our biggest problems. We have an obligation to not get bogged down in the same partisan battles that have so frustrated citizens across this country. And the American people have made it very clear. In fact, they've made it crystal clear that leaders in Washington, D.C. must get the job done or get the heck out of the way. I ran for the Senate because I have hope for America. We're all here tonight because we have hope for America. It's the same hope that's shared by millions of Coloradans, and it drives every decision that we in this country make. I believe, as we saw President Reagan, that this country runs on optimism, on high expectations, and on a hunger to succeed. Sometimes throughout the campaign, it felt to me like the attacks were just too much, that they were getting too brutal and the odds were becoming too long for us to win. But in those moments, in those challenging times, I only had to think about how lucky I was to be able to get out to each and every day on the campaign trail, to meet extraordinary people doing absolutely amazing things, telling me the stories of their lives. I heard about men and women who were striking out on their own, starting new businesses, pursuing educational degrees for the first time in their lives, to advance their careers, to create a better life for their family. And when I would meet these Coloradans, I'd ask myself a very simple question: don't they deserve a better government, a government that they can be proud of again? Don't they deserve a government that understands that it's the government's job to make sure that it gets out of the way so that people can provide a level playing field, so that we can provide a level playing field? Don't they deserve a government that's responsive to their needs and not the needs of the few and the influential? And don't they deserve a government that understands that this is a nation of achievers, of risers, and of hard workers, eager for a fair shot? And the answer was simple. Of course they do. And now it's our job in the United States Senate to deliver on that promise, to deliver that government. A limited government that works for, not against, the American people, and to earn the trust that has been placed in us. Because we cannot forget who we work for. We work for the single mom struggling to make ends meet. We work for the entrepreneur wondering how they're going to stay in business tomorrow. We work for the person who's trying to figure out how they're going to pay this month's mortgage. And we work for young people stuck in schools that sometimes fail the promises that they were given, and how they're going to pay for college. And above all, we in this country must remain hopeful, and we must remain optimistic. The American spirit is that one inexhaustible resource that we all possess. And if it's properly harnessed, there is no task that we cannot complete. When our founding fathers came together to pledge their lives, their honor, their freedoms, and their fortunes, they knew it was a risk. But they did it because of their belief that together they could make a greater nation than what they left behind. And it is our job, each and every one of us, to do the same. While we don't face the same challenges as our forefathers, we do face daunting ones nonetheless. America is challenged by enemies abroad, by fiscal mismanagement at home, and by a deficit of leadership at the very top of our government. The time to address these issues is now. But as long as we have the support of the American people, I believe that our leaders can step up to meet these challenges. On the night of November 4th, I said that I was convinced that we won the election because we asked Coloradans to lift their eyes to that great Rocky Mountain horizon, to look ahead to a future that is brighter than the present, and that ours is a forever young state with an ever hopeful attitude. So tonight, let us challenge to the American people and ask the American people to lift their eyes up, to be ever hopeful about an evergreen promise, that is America. We're here because we believe that there is something exceptional about our nation. We believe in courageous ideas and bold beliefs. We believe in the power of the American story, a belief that isn't electioneering, but enduring, a generational commitment to be better tomorrow than we are today, the moral compulsion to make sure that we give our children and grandchildren a better starting point than the one that we inherited from our parents and grandparents. And I believe we can fix this nation's problems together, that we can build a greater, stronger, thriving economy together, achieve energy independence together, create better education for our children together, and preserve and protect the incredible resources of this state together. And together, we must always resist that soft discrimination of low expectations, to stand up against diminished hope for future and demand greatness from our leaders, not just some of the time, but all of the time. The American people will lift their eyes up to leaders who do not step toward the status quo and think that they deserve a pat on the back. But we will provide a stern warning to all who fail to courageously act and challenge this nation time and time again to never turn away from the things that we know we have to do, those things that we know are right. Over 200 years ago, people from around the world came to the United States to wonder what had made this nation so great. They were in search of answers for how we could become just like this country, strong economies, nations of freedom, of liberties. And what they realized about our nation is an inherent American value. The recognition that each and every one of us possesses within us a passion to rise. That passion to rise. Imagine that if we step up to this challenge to find leaders, to make our leaders lead again, imagine a nation that rises. Imagine a nation of a growing economy where education prospects are bright. Imagine a nation of energy independence. Imagine a nation secure, safe. Imagine a nation that has embraced its greatest challenges, and has overcome those greatest challenges. Imagine a nation that will never again turn toward the wrong direction, but instead will always pursue the path that leads us to that victory, that moment in time that Ronald Reagan spoke about, to that brighter city on the hill. The fact is, we know together we can do that. It's an honor to be here with you at the Steamboat Institute. It's an honor to be your next United States Senator from Colorado. And together, I know that all of us will work tirelessly to address the challenges that we know we must in order to restore, to revitalize, and to invigorate the greatness of this truly exceptional United States. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you tonight. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
All right, Senator-elect Gardner is going to take just a few questions, and then we are going to have a Christmas party, holiday party that we'd like all of you to stay for, and he will be staying and mingling. So if you don't get to ask your question right now, don't worry, he's going to be here and we'd like you all to stick around and enjoy the party anyway. So, does anyone have a question?
You spoke of all the change, positive change on the national level, but since solutions are best at the local level, how would you describe your relationship with Senator Bennett?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Senator Bennett, the election was November 4th. We went back to session that next week. I think it was right around November 11th or 12th. And one of the first meetings I had was to go to Senator Bennett's office to talk about the election, how we could work together, what we could do to share ideas, and how we can work together. Now, look, there are going to be things and times that we will agree and things and times that we will disagree on. But the fact is, we both represent the state of Colorado, and it's in our best interest to find those common solutions for Colorado that will help this state. And you said it very well. Washington, D.C. has proved that too often it's incapable of finding solutions. And so while we try to change that in Washington, we also have to make sure that maybe there's some things that Washington shouldn't be doing, and we should make sure that the states are again empowered to make those kinds of decisions, choices, and policies. We talked about education tonight in the speech. Let's make sure that we're restoring power to the states.
Mr. Gardner, thank you for joining us in Steamboat tonight. We hope to see you many times over the next 6 years during your term. You are going to be joining the Club of 100. And on Tuesday, we saw Senator Tom Coburn from the state of Oklahoma give his final remarks on the floor of the Senate. And one of the things that he said is, out of 100, 60 isn't the most important number to beat a filibuster. 51 isn't the most important number to have a majority. In the Senate, the most important number is 1. So while we can talk to people that serve in the House of Representatives, and they can hide behind leadership and procedural votes, it's different in the Senate. You can stand up for the things that you talked about during your speech tonight. So my question to you is, how will you use your power of 1 when you're in the Club of 100?
Yeah, it's a great question, and Tom Coburn has certainly done some incredible work. I mean, if you look at the work he's done, whether it's on spending issues, whether it's on making sure that the government is truly focused on doing the things that it's supposed to be doing, the Constitution, and I think Tom Coburn time and time again made this very clear, the Constitution isn't a green light on government power, it's a red light of limited power. And that's what we all have to remind ourselves, that it limits that power. And so to use that vote, to use the ability to make sure that we're crafting good policies, those policies that are geared toward restoring rights, values, freedoms, as we know in the Constitution. But it also is that opportunity and obligation to make sure that we are stopping bad ideas from moving forward. Whether it's continuing to work to repeal and replace Obamacare and making sure that we are putting Republican or conservative ideas forward to do that, or whether it's stopping bad ideas and perhaps bad individuals from taking place in government. That's an important role that the United States Senate will play. You know, if you look at going back to some of the words of our founding fathers, they talked about how the Senate was the description of the House and the Senate, comparing the House to the teacup and the Senate to the saucer. The fact is, we can make sure that the United States Senate is that backstop for the American people, that backstop for freedom, to make sure that we are always putting freedom first, and that's how that power of 1 must and should work.
You have time for one more question?
Yes.
Can we do one more?
So the power of 1 notwithstanding, you mentioned gridlock in Washington, and you also mentioned passing bills and piling them on the president's desk. If you had your druthers, would you rather pile bills on the desk that won't get signed, or are you interested in compromise so that we can get past the gridlock and get signatures?
It's a great question, a great point, and I think that many of the bills that I'm talking about that passed out of the House had bipartisan support, strong bipartisan support. Let's put those on the president's desk. Let's put those ideas on the president's desk that have the support of the American people. That's why I think Mitch McConnell has said that one of the first actions the Senate will take to put on the president's desk is the Keystone Pipeline. Has strong, broad, bipartisan support. Senator Bennett voted for the Keystone Pipeline. If you look at the other bills that we can work on in the House, I mean, there's bills dealing with job creation, energy independence. We should put those on the president's desk. There's broad bipartisan support to repeal the medical device tax, which is hurting jobs and hurting job creators in this country while stifling innovation. There's broad bipartisan support to repeal the Independent Payment Advisory Board. This is the board of bureaucrats that makes decisions about what people in Medicare, kinds of health care they can and cannot have. We should put that on the president's desk. Broad support to reestablish the 40-hour work week in this country. Broad bipartisan support. Let's put that on the president's desk. And so, yes, I think we can put a pile on the president's desk that has the support of Republicans, of Democrats, of the people of this country. And one of two things are going to happen. The president will sign them and we will move this country forward, or the president will stop them, veto them. And I think that will show to the American people as we go into 2016 what is truly hurting this country's ability to move forward. Look, I thank you very much for the opportunity of the Steamboat Institute to be here. I want to share with you a final story, and we go back to mingling and enjoying the time tonight together. It was, I think I had first been sworn in 2010, or 2011, in January 2011. It was January then of 2013 when I was sworn in for the second time. And though you've watched C-SPAN, many of you have been to the chamber, the House of Representatives itself. When we were sworn in January, I was sitting toward the back of the chamber in the House, and the Speaker of the House is up toward the front, and there's that giant flag behind the Speaker's dais. And I'll never forget where I was. I was kind of back toward the end of the chamber. I was standing next to a member of Congress, Jamie Herrera Butler from Washington State. My daughter was with us on the House floor, and we were told to stand to take the oath of office. And as I stood to take the oath of office and we raised our right hand, I noticed the gentleman in front of me, that there was a member of Congress in front of me by the name of Sam Johnson. Now, I don't know if anybody knows Sam Johnson in this room, but Sam Johnson is a member of Congress from Texas, and he spent 7 years in the Hanoi Hilton. Many of those months were spent in solitary confinement. And as he raised his right hand, a hand that had been hurt and tortured and injured from the plane crash that led to his time in Vietnam, the words that the Speaker gave, I will defend the Constitution, take the oath of office. In order to see the Speaker deliver those words, I had to look right through that hand of Sam Johnson. And I will never forget, as we work and fight and stand up for the freedoms, the rights of this country, looking through that hand of freedom of Sam Johnson, that hand that has stood on the front lines of fighting for this country, and recognizing that there are many people in this room and beyond who have done the same thing time and time again. And it's those hands of freedom that we must always make sure we stand up for, we fight for, and that we hold together to rise up and meet the greatest challenges of this time. Thank you very much, Steamboat Institute. Merry Christmas to all of you. Happy holidays. We've got some work to do. Let's get it done.